Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2020 P&A and CAP Annual Conference. I'm Kurt Decker, Executive Director of the National Disability Rights Network. I'm joined here in this virtual room with Tom Massaw, President of the NDRN Board of Directors and Executive Director of Disability Rights Arkansas. Each year, I and my staff look forward to the annual conference as a time for P&As and CAPs to come together to continue your education, build new skills, and meet your colleagues from around the country. Obviously, this year is different. The coronavirus pandemic has upended all our lives and forced us to make dramatic changes to the way we typically host this conference. Over the next 3 weeks, we have an exciting array of programming scheduled, all brought to you virtually through the use of technology, and with more than 70 sessions and institutes planned, there is something for everyone. These trainings are designed specifically with the needs of P&A and CAP staff in mind. We are, of course, disappointed that we won't see you in person this year, but I'm most excited about that this virtual experience we have created means everyone in the P&A network and CAP staff can participate. I would like to thank my staff at NDRN and all the speakers and presenters who have worked so hard to make this happen. This has taken a lot of work to change from an in-person meeting to a virtual one, and we're very excited that it's going to work so well. I also want to extend my thanks to our federal partners. This event would not be possible without the generous support of the Administration on Intellectual Disability and Developmental Disabilities, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and the Rehabilitation Services Administration in the Department of Education, as well as our partners in the Social Security Administration. I also want to thank the CEOs for participating and supporting this new effort to bring you this necessary training and skill building experience. Lastly, I want to thank all of you, the hardworking and dedicated P&A and CAP staff, board members, and PAMIA Council advisors. Circumstances may have separated us this year, but we will remain united in our mission to protect and advocate for the rights of people with all disabilities. With that, let's turn to the purpose of this opening session. Tom?
Thank you, Kurt. Hello from Little Rock, everyone. I would also like to extend my thanks to all those who made this conference possible. I know it was a considerable amount of time, and I know it was a considerable amount of work in a short amount of time. So on behalf of NDRN's Board of Directors and all of us in the network, we'll benefit from your hard work. Thank you. When the P&A system was created more than 40 years ago, the country was a very different place. Having a disability often meant opportunities. It meant spending life in an institution, places like Willowbrook, places where people with disabilities could be locked away, hidden from view, ignored. This year, the Americans with Disabilities Act turns 30 years old. This anniversary is a reminder that while our nation has made considerable progress, our work is not done. Too many people with disabilities remain isolated from their communities, hard to reach, hard to find, and serve. Despite all our advancements, there continues to be a pervasive strain of stigma and low expectations that regulate people with disabilities to the outskirts of society. Our job now, as it has been for 40 years, is to find them, to shine a bright light on the places and conditions people either do not know or wish to forget, to guard their safety and their rights, and to break down barriers so that all people with disabilities have equality of opportunity and are able to participate fully in community life by exercising their choice and self-determination. These are some of the themes that will be discussed today. To begin, we will hear first from Julie Hocker, Commissioner of the Administration on Disabilities within the Administration for Community Living.
Good morning. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the annual NDRN conference. It would have been great to be together in Phoenix this week, but I hope that we'll be together again soon. In the meantime, convening in this virtual environment is still an opportunity to connect and to share ideas and to talk about the very important issues that we are facing together. The last few months have been nothing but unusual and trying. The COVID-19 pandemic has required all of us to not only continue to serve as leaders, but to serve as innovators and inventors, problem solvers and partners, technicians and teachers. You have rolled up your sleeves, you've dived in, and you have delivered. So today, I want to start off by saying thank you. Thank you on behalf of all of the individuals that you have directly served and the many, many millions more who can seek care, stay home, and remain safe because of your work. Thank you. ACL is glad to support this conference and your work, and I hope that this will provide you an opportunity to learn together and advance your legal advocacy practice so that you can continue the important role of protecting people's rights. I also want to thank Kurt and the entire NDRN team for all of the planning that went into this conference, especially moving it to a virtual platform. Today, I want to spend time giving you an update from Washington, from ACL. As your federal partners, it's our honor to serve alongside of you. I don't need to tell you about the particular difficulties and challenges faced and felt by so many in the disability community. At no time in our recent history has it been harder or more important for people with disabilities to stay healthy, stay safe, and stay connected. We know that many individuals with disabilities face underlying health conditions, such as hypertension, diabetes, and pulmonary issues, which place us at higher risk for contracting COVID-19. We also know that many of us fear seeking the routine and life-saving care that we need. Staying healthy is important. When the pandemic struck, we knew that access to testing and treatment would be even more challenging. We feared that individuals with disabilities would be denied care. But together we, and the agencies that you lead all across the nation, got to work fast. ACL and our partners at the Office of Civil Rights had a clear vision rooted in our nation's civil rights laws. No one should be denied care or face illegal discrimination simply because they have a disability. We responded quickly to the concerns that you brought forward, and in March, OCR issued a bulletin affirming the equal rights and protections guaranteed in the law. But this was just the beginning. Across the country, PNAs jumped into action to protect the rights of people with disabilities. Within days, a number of PNAs, like Alabama Disability Advocacy Program and the Disability Rights Pennsylvania, filed OCR complaints alleging that their state standards discriminated against people with disabilities. Thanks to the quick action by OCR, both states now have updated standards of care. And we continue to see action in other states, such as Oklahoma just this past week. Thanks to your work, your long nights, your endless calls and research, many more individuals with disabilities went to bed at night knowing that if they needed care, they could get it. Your work to protect people with disabilities from care rationing is only one example of the extraordinary work you are doing in response to this pandemic. From educating medical professionals to assisting individuals in knowing their rights to ensuring health messages are accessible to all, you have been working to keep people with disabilities healthy. Just as important as staying healthy is staying safe. Staying safe has always been a challenge for many of us with disabilities, and COVID-19 brought new fears and new concerns. We know that people are safer living in the community where they can be seen by others and participate alongside others. This pandemic has further strained many of the home and community-based systems and support people with disabilities and their families rely on to stay safely living independently in their communities. From food insecurity to the shrinking DSP workforce, reduced employment services and supports, to special education services and supports going virtual, the formal and the informal supports so many individuals with disabilities rely on in our communities are strained and restricted. And we also worry about the health and well-being of individuals still living in congregate settings who need access to our services and protections. Protecting the safety of people with disabilities is what the PNA network has been doing from day one. During this pandemic, you have quickly pivoted to virtual monitoring for health and safety where you can, and you are calling on states to ensure they are tracking the spread of COVID-19 in congregate care facilities. Working with your local and state leaders and partners, you have forged ahead in finding safe and effective ways to reach individuals where they are, including in long-term care facilities. And you have been doing it while navigating all the challenges that come with social distancing and remote work. While we all look for ways to stay connected at work, for many of us, staying connected at all has been one of our greatest challenges throughout this pandemic. Yet we know that staying connected is vital for our health and our safety. A growing body of research tells us that social isolation can have devastating health effects, and at least one study indicates that social isolation increases the risk of being targeted for abuse and neglect. The work you do every day to ensure the rights of individuals with disabilities to live in communities is critical to addressing social isolation, and your leadership and partnerships and advocacy will be critical as we move through the next few months of our fight against this virus. I also want to recognize all the important work that you're doing not directly related to COVID-19. Last year, 14,000 clients received professional legal advocacy, and over 17,000 people received information referrals from the PNAs. I am also encouraged that there was a 78% increase in the number of individuals with developmental disabilities whose rights were enforced, retained, restored, and expanded. Last year, many of you participated in the first CEO Board of Directors training. And as a growing number of you look to the next steps in your career or retirement, you're preparing to leave your organizations stronger and better prepared for effective transitions. At ACL, we're also continuing all of our work on behalf of individuals with disabilities across our nation. Over the past several weeks, we have announced several new funding opportunities, including a project on closing the health disparity gap for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities by strengthening the U.S. healthcare workforce. And we also announced a resource center on alternatives to guardianship for youth. Both of these are closing on June 29th. And together, next month, we will celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. This landmark civil rights law guarantees us our rights and our freedoms, and access to the opportunities of our great nation. This landmark law is only a reality because of leaders like you who have not just worked, but who have fought hard for all of us. Across the country, PNAs have never tired of defending disability rights. You have led the work of translating the ADA's vision into a reality for millions of people with disabilities, myself included. We will celebrate this anniversary in the weeks to come, but today, as a child of the ADA generation, thank you for all that you have done to uphold the promises and the guarantees we proudly point to in the law of the land today. Thank you for all that you do, and for all of the ways that you have responded and risen to the challenges brought to us by the COVID-19 pandemic. We could not have fully imagined every last battle this virus would bring, but we knew that we could count on you to be there, ready to fight. Have a wonderful conference and a great week. I look forward to the day that we'll all be together again soon. Until then, thank you again.
Thank you, Julie, for your leadership.
Now it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Assistant Secretary for Mental Health and Substance Abuse, Eleanor McCants-Katz. Dr. McCants-Katz is the first Secretary for Mental Health and Substance Abuse and leads the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, which is in charge of spearheading our approach to the opioid epidemic and providing services to people with mental illness. SAMHSA also is the oversight agency for the PNA program for individuals with mental illness. Welcome, Dr. McCants-Katz.
I'm Dr. Eleanor McCants-Katz, and I'm the Assistant Secretary for Mental Health and Substance Use, and I lead the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to say a few words at the start of your PAMI conference. Be really nice to be able to see you all in person, but not possible given these difficult times. And I wanted to take the opportunity to do a video because I really believe the work that you do is important, and I want to acknowledge it. I want to thank you for it. And I want to talk to you a little bit about why I think the work is important and where I hope we can go in partnership. In times of pandemics like COVID-19, the work that advocates like you do becomes even more important. When there are scarce resources, as we know there have been for so many different areas of need during this time, too often, people want to place judgments or values on various types of life, and too often, people that are living with disabilities um, may not be the ones who are seen as being the priorities. That should not be the case. That should not be the case. People living with disabilities have every right to every resource, just as all Americans do. And so the work that you do becomes even more important as you advocate for the rights of people who are living with disabilities. We have to fight any kind of attempts to make assignments regarding value of life. It's not for anyone to judge the value of life. All lives are precious, and all lives are to be valued, and all lives are to be protected. And you all do great work in that area. I wanted to make a few points that I hope you'll find useful. I thought it was a good opportunity to say that I think SAMHSA has prioritized the needs, particularly of people with serious mental illness. We are trying to direct as much resource as possible to this vulnerable population, this high need population. I wanted to mention a few of the services that we have available for people that are living with serious mental illnesses. One of the important programs that has really expanded since I've been in my position is our certified community behavioral health clinics, which I think integrate care. They integrate the care of mental disorders, substance use disorders, and physical health conditions so that a person can go to one place and get their medical and mental health and substance problem issues addressed. These programs also have 24/7 crisis intervention services, very important because we want to keep people with serious mental health problems out of emergency departments. Emergency departments, particularly in these times of high rates of viral infections in people, is not the place for people that are experiencing a mental health crisis. And so these crisis intervention services become even more important. We've made housing a focus at SAMHSA, particularly housing for the seriously mentally ill, and our housing programs now must focus not only on making sure that people seeking services get mental health services, but also I have asked that they focus on getting people housed. It's really very difficult for somebody to be able to live their lives in a way that's satisfying, in a way that's safe, and in a way that allows them to pursue their own goals if they're not stably housed. So our programs now are focusing very much on that. And I can tell you that we work with Housing and Urban Development to try to raise awareness of the needs of people living with disabilities and serious mental illness every chance that we get, so that more resources from HUD might go into this area as well. Our criminal justice programs divert people with serious mental illness away from incarceration and into treatment. We think those are very important programs, and we will continue to advocate for those programs and their expansion. One of the very important things to me, one of the most important things I've been able to do since taking my job is that we were able to look into the issue of providing mental health services to people who were in jails and prisons. This had been prohibited. Our block grant funds had not been allowed to be used for that. I can tell you, as somebody who used to run the state hospital in my state, that all of the admissions to the psychiatric service were people that were coming in through the forensic system. That's not right. That's not right. People should be able to get care and treatment and live in their communities. And so now community providers can go into jails and prisons and provide mental health services. In that way, the goal, of course, is for people to connect with those clinicians, connect with peer providers, and get them back into communities so that they can live outside of the criminal justice system. That's, again, a very important part of what we are focusing on at SAMHSA. We also have focused on our first episode psychosis programs, our assisted outpatient treatment programs, and a relatively new program in assertive community treatment. Again, team-based care for people with the most serious mental illnesses, very important and a priority for me. With the agency. We have worked to increase technical assistance and training to prepare the behavioral health workforce to provide the best, safest, and most effective care to people living with serious mental illness. We've also funded new technical assistance programs for peers and for families that are living with loved ones who are affected by these very serious mental illnesses. These are new programs, but programs that I think will be welcome nationwide. Congress made additional funding available to SAMHSA to address COVID problems in states and communities. SAMHSA has already distributed funds from the CARES Act to states, communities, tribes, and territories. We had a huge response. We put out a funding announcement for 10 days, and we got over 130 applications, of which we could fund somewhere over 90 applications. But it tells you really the needs that are out there. One of the things that we required was that the majority of the money go to services to assist people living with serious mental illness and substance use disorders who are struggling in this time of coronavirus. I really want to ask you as advocates for people with disabilities, for people that are living with serious mental health conditions, to work collaboratively with us at SAMHSA. My view of the world is that people have a right to treatment. Serious mental illnesses are brain diseases. It's our obligation to help people to get the care and services they need, to assure that they get the care and services that they need, and to help them to understand that psychiatric care, medical care, including judicious use of psychotropic medication, can be helpful and can help them to get back to living in their communities. I ask you to take that and think it through and help us to get that message out so that we can have more people with disabilities living in their communities. It's also important that we have hospital beds available. One of the things that concerns me is the loss of mental health service beds in these times of COVID virus. What I can tell you also is that emergency housing is being diverted to people with COVID or who need to be quarantined and may not have a place to quarantine. So those housing opportunities that used to be available for people with serious mental illness coming out of the hospital now are not so available anymore. And those folks are being put on the street. Please do not do anything that would jeopardize hospital beds for people with serious mental illness. We need these beds available to help people that are severely and acutely ill so that we can get them back to their communities and get them the care and services that they need, both on an inpatient basis and then within their communities. I hope that PAMI members will partner with us on this. This is an expectation that I have. I think you all are up to doing that, and I invite you to work with us. But you should be assured that this is a battle that we will fight at SAMHSA. So having said that, I hope that you have a good conference. I'm pleased to have had the opportunity to speak with you, and I invite you, as I said, I invite you to work with us collaboratively now and going forward. Thanks very much.
It has been another busy year for the PNA and CAP network. In every corner of the country, we have defended rights, challenged stereotypes, and fought against abuse, neglect, discrimination, and exploitation. We have taken the fight to the courtroom, to the classroom, to workplaces, and to the halls of power. In recognition of that work, the National Disabilities Rights Network honors PNAs and their clients who have demonstrated outstanding leadership and effectiveness in the fight for the rights of people with disabilities with the annual NDRN Advocacy Award. This year, it is my privilege to announce our first NDRN Advocacy Award goes to the Disability Law Center of Alaska. DLC is being recognized for its work conducting investigations and monitoring through the new Representative Payee Oversight Program. When Congress passed the Strengthening Protections for Social Security Beneficiaries Act, creating the program, it recognized the critical role PNAs have played for 40 years in keeping our nation's most vulnerable citizens safe from abuse and neglect. DLC's advocacy to protect beneficiaries' best interests through collaboration and networking is a laudable demonstration of the intent of the law. And despite the vast size and remote landscape that categorizes Alaska, DLC has aggressively pursued reviews and oversight of RET payees in every part of the state. DLC has shown extraordinary leadership and set an example for all of us in the network. Congratulations to the Disability Law Center of Alaska. Here to accept the award is Tamada Douglas.
Hi everyone, this is Tamada Douglas coming to you all the way from beautiful Anchorage, Alaska. I am honored to accept the NDRN Advocacy Award on behalf of the Disability Law Center of Alaska for our work with individuals with disabilities, beneficiaries with representative payees. When we heard that this year's conference theme is advocating on behalf of individuals with disabilities in hard to reach places, we knew that this theme fit Alaska perfectly. I mean, we are the only state in the nation whose capital cannot be reached by car. You have to go there by either ferry or a plane. And we have a number of villages that you can't reach by car either. You have to take either a boat or a small plane that we call puddle jumpers, or by four-wheeler or a boat. You get the idea. We've had a number of staff get stuck in rural locations. We had one advocate who had to run after a plane on a gravel runway to try to get a ride home. Recently, we went to Juneau to do a representative payee review, and that is an hour-and-a-half flight from Anchorage, but instead it took about 13 hours. So we know about hard to reach places in this state. Regardless of our remoteness, the Disability Law Center of Alaska's mission is to reach all individuals with disability throughout our great state, and we are very appreciative and very grateful for this award. Thank you so much.
Congratulations again to the Disability Law Center of Alaska.
Now it is my honor to introduce our next speaker, United States Senator Chris Van Hollen. Senator Van Hollen was elected to represent the state of Maryland in 2016. An ardent supporter of the rights of people with disabilities and the PNA and CAP programs, Senator Van Hollen work with members of both parties to pass the ABLE Act and to strengthen the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Welcome, Senator Van Hollen.
Hi, I'm Chris Van Hollen, and I'm proud to represent the great state of Maryland in the United States Senate. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to address you, the members of the National Disability Rights Network, as you gather virtually for your national conference on the Protection and Advocacy Program and the Client Assistance Program, and are joined by disabilities advocates from around the country. Congress has asked you to do important work, to empower and to advocate on behalf of people with disabilities, a mission that's even more important during this COVID-19 crisis, when the rights of people with disabilities, from young students to senior citizens, are facing new threats and new challenges. It's with your help that our nation has made tremendous progress since the passage of ADA 30 years ago this summer. People with disabilities are more integrated into our society and into our economy than ever before, and more independent. But we know we have much work still to do. And the best way to celebrate this milestone anniversary is to recommit ourselves to the work yet undone, to fight to properly fund the P&A program and the Client Assistance Program, to fully fund the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, to end the 14C subminimum wage certificates, and to pass other initiatives that will help us finally achieve our goal of full and equal opportunity for all. We must also fight against any efforts to turn back the clock on the progress we have made. To truly advocate for our priorities, we need everyone to respond to the census, and we need everybody to vote. Unfortunately, COVID-19 looks like it may be with us for a while in one form or another. So we must work now to ensure that people with disabilities are empowered to cast private and independent ballots however they choose, whether by mail, in person at accessible and safe voting places, or other methods. And P&As are absolutely essential partners in working toward equal access in voter participation. This election will be close, and people with disabilities have tremendous influence over its outcome. Let's work together to make sure that everybody has an equal opportunity to make their voice heard and to cast their vote. Thank you, and take care.
Our next speaker is Hector Ramirez. Hector is a lifelong disability rights advocate and a person with autism and bipolar disorder. He works with county and state, national organizations, and policymakers to create legislation to reduce mental health disparities, especially for racial and ethnic communities. Hector also serves on the boards of Disability Rights California and the National Disability Rights Network.
Hello, Hector. Thank you so much for joining us at our opening plenary at the NDRN virtual conference. And thank you for your assistance as being a member of the California P&A board and also a board member at NDRN.
Thank you, Kurt. Hola. My name is Hector Ramirez. I'm Chiricahua Apache Mexican. I live in California, in Los Angeles County. I have autism. I have a psychiatric disability. I'm also hard of hearing. And so that kind of has been an interesting combination. COVID has really changed the landscape for disability rights all throughout the country, if not the world. I live in an area that is right now a hotspot. We have a significant number of folks who not only have tested positive, but who have also really had some really adverse health outcomes, including death. That's something that I'm really familiar with. I just recently lost one of my family members, my aunt, who passed of COVID-19. She was Native, she was Mexican, she was an elder, she was a person of an advanced age that had developed an underlying medical condition. And even though we were all taking a lot of precaution to be careful, this is something that still got her. And it has significantly affected me in my family in that way. But I think also in the broader picture, COVID is having a significant impact on people with disabilities everywhere, from everything from difficulty accessing food, difficulty accessing medical services, even just accessing basic information about what is happening and where to get resources has been a significant issue. Um, Accessibility really is one of the most forefront issues for all of us right now, not just as folks move to telecommunications, platforms to work with folks, but things like closed captions, sign language, accessible information, those sort of things have become really difficult for all of us. And as a consequence, we're seeing a significant number of the people that are testing positive for COVID and are dying from COVID being people with disabilities.
Yes, well, and you're so right that the pandemic has really exposed so many issues that the disability community has been dealing with for years. And given your background and your experience, you certainly know about the challenges in trying to reach out to the minority population of people with disabilities. Can you tell us a little bit about those challenges? Clearly, it's been exacerbated by the COVID, but you've been dealing this for decades. Tell us a little more about the challenges of reaching hard to serve populations, especially in the minority community.
Well, definitely. Historically disenfranchised communities, people of color, definitely we're feeling the brunt of this the hardest. COVID has really bared truth some of the health disparities that not just people with disabilities have been facing, but people of different ethnic and cultural backgrounds. Getting information in multiple language has been almost impossible to get. Things like in California, where at least 1 out of 4 people speak Spanish, getting information in Spanish has been very difficult. Even for some of our members from the API community, our African American or Black communities have also faced a significant brunt with this. It's not just that they have years of health inequalities, they have decades and a generation of racism that has really built up to the consequences of so many folks dying from COVID and getting sick. So things like accessing medical services or even going outside with a mask has been very difficult for folks. Many of us were already, as people of color, facing, profiling and discrimination, but going outside with a mask or glasses has even become an even more dangerous situation as far as just going to the grocery store. So things like that have been very difficult for folks. We already had, before COVID, situations where a lot of folks in those communities would not access services because of fears under the current immigration policies and fears of deportations and public charge. But now folks are so scared because of so much misinformation out there and the lack of uniformity and really truthful information. Folks are even afraid to just go to the doctor because they don't know if their doctors' clinics are open or if it's even safe to go there. The other thing that we're seeing for some of our communities is we're seeing a significant rise in xenophobia and hate crimes that also includes people with disabilities.
That's right. And as you know, NDRN has done a lot of work on hate crimes because we know that hate crimes affect the disability population as well. But some of your personal experience that brought you to this work, tell us a little more about your personal experience as a person with a variety of disabilities and how that shaped your advocacy efforts in this now new pandemic era.
Like I said, I'm Native American. I have autism, so my diagnosis was earlier on, and earlier on, I was removed from my family, and I ended up in one of the state developmental centers here in California, Camarillo State Developmental Center, which was also next to the state hospital. We were the same family. I want to say, for lack of better words, that one of the largest congregate settings, as people are saying right now. And I was able to get out of there after the passage of the Land-Tribune Act, and through the work of actually the PNA, the board that I now serve. Now it's called Disability Rights California. I don't recall the previous incarnation that it had, but the work and the mission that they did back then still continues. And it was because of that I was able to actually leave the institution when I was 13, 14 years old. And I was able to be reunited with my family, reunited back with the community. And so I have that as part of my legacy. I feel like like many people with disabilities, I'm always having to fight just for my right to exist as a person with a disability.
And tell me, if you will, and tell our audience what it was like living in an institution, but then what it felt like when you became able to live in the community, get reunited with your family.
It's so eerily similar to being home right now and not being able to go outside or seeing people. It was, I felt like I had done something wrong. I felt like my family had thrown me away, which wasn't the case. There was a lot of abuse in the state hospital. Both violence existed, physical and sexual, for many of us. Education really wasn't much of a thing. I learned to read, and through some of the deaf folks that were there, I learned the alphabet that way. I learned to read through the National Geographic magazines that people would donate. I never really thought I would ever be out with normal people. I felt like I had done something wrong and I had no idea what it was. And that was far from the truth. Being reunited with my family almost felt, it took me a while to adjust to reality because it didn't feel real to me. Being in the hospital, I always used to imagine, and I think perhaps was one of the things that kind of helped me to survive, that I was with my family and that we were going on vacations, and that wasn't the case. I was still in the developmental center. So when I left, it took many years to be able to kind of adjust to reality. I felt like I was on an extended field trip or vacation. Now, having been, practicing physical distancing, it's kind of similar. And I understand why people feel so anxious, because you're not allowed to see your friends. You're not allowed to go to work. You're not allowed to go to the places that you want to go. And there's a real reason now, but in many ways, it's just so eerie similar to those type of situations. So for me, I've been struggling because I feel like I'm still back at the state hospital and I'm slowly waking up. And I feel like all of this has been a dream. It's been a weird struggle. My doctor says that it's PTSD, that I'm kind of just relapsing. So I've been struggling with that, but I kind of rely on what my disability community has done, which is, look out for one another, stick up and advocate. And that's kind of what I've been doing to cope, lately. My mother and I bought this mobile home about a year ago, actually, through my able account. We were able to get a mobile home. And we live here in a community with 108 seniors. I'm the youngest person. I'm only 45. And I have really wonderful neighbors. And a lot of them, when the stay-at-home order happened, they couldn't go to the store because they were afraid. Most of them have underlying medical conditions. So a lot of them couldn't go to the store. And when they would go, everybody was hoarding food. So there wasn't the food that they needed. Toilet paper was not at the top of priority. They were looking for like water and food, and they couldn't find those items. And I was walking my dog, and I ran into a neighbor who looked very, very bad. And I had a conversation about what's happening to her and I offered to go to the store. And she was so thankful. And I was very surprised that she was so thankful. And she admitted to me, she was kind of vulnerable, and she admitted to me that she had run out of food a while ago, that she had started eating her cat's food. So she was eating cat food. And I realized that a lot of the folks in my neighborhood, including the disabled folks, were on the same boat. So that's when I just did what we do with the P&As, which was starting hitting the ground and to getting to work.
And that's a great transition to, it sounds, based on your experience and what you're seeing in your community, the P&As are needed even more than ever now in this particular situation. So thoughts about what the P&A in California and the P&A system across the country can do to help these very isolated, marginalized communities who are experiencing now a whole, as you just said, almost a feeling of regression about living in the community. What do you see the P&A system being able to do to help that?
I think right now the P&As are our only survival option for people with disabilities everywhere, including seniors. One of the things that we have seen, earlier on, is that disabled folks and seniors literally were left behind to fend for themselves. It was just such a chaotic situation that even our great state of California wasn't necessarily prepared to meet the basic needs, shelter, food, water, and medical care. And even now, a couple months after that, we're still having to be the ones to look out for our own. The Americans with Disability Act is going to turn 30 this year. I'm pre-ADA, and I was so glad, but accessibility has been such a big issue for all of us. Everything from making sure that we have access to those services, or making sure that our legislators are hearing about us. The P&As are really, really vital, especially when states were having conversations about medical rationing. I cannot tell you the number of people that were talking about being so scared and just ending their lives before it got to that point. It was a really terrifying conversation that states were having. And I was so glad that all the P&As, including mine here in California, started really speaking out and advocating and changing, the minds of our governors, because states were actually really going to do that. And they might even do it. So the P&As now more than ever, we need them. Everything from access to education, access to healthcare, transportation. Disability is just such an overarching issue that the work that the P&As are doing is just so pivotal. All of you, I consider all of you are essential workers. You are like our legal frontline staff. Many of us were left alone at home as our care workers stopped showing up, or they got sick, or they got died. Now the congregate settings like nursing homes and sober living homes and some of the psychiatric hospitals where my peers are, they're all testing positive, they're all getting sick, and nobody's talking about that. The landscape of disabilities has changed completely, but the one thing that stays the same is the work that all of you do. And it's just so important to support you all.
Well, thank you, Hector. That's a great way to end our conversation. And thank you for your great work and for your commitment to the P&A system and to your community. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
P&As are constantly called upon to protect the rights of people with disabilities in hard-to-reach places, and each time we rise to the challenge. When news reports began to appear in 2018 that immigrant children were being separated from their parents and housed in detention centers, we knew what we had to do. To continue our tradition of recognizing P&As for their work and fitting with the theme of this plenary, our next NDRN Advocacy Award is presented to Disability Rights Florida for their efforts to monitor the Office of Refugee Resettlement Detention Facility, known as Homestead. Here to accept and tell us more about their work is Interim Executive Director Peter Sleesman.
Hi, I'm Pete Sleesman. I'm the Interim Executive Director of Disability Rights Florida, and I'm very proud to accept the NDRN Advocacy Award this year on behalf of Disability Rights Florida, its staff, and its board of directors. The project which we won the award for was the monitoring of Homestead Immigration Shelter down in Homestead, Florida. Immigrant children who arrive in the U.S. border without an adult parent or guardian are placed in the custody of the Federal Office of Refugee Resettlement, which is an agency of the Department of Health and Human Services. Many of the children detained in ORR facilities have sustained significant trauma and may require appropriate mental health care for symptoms of anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, sleep disturbances, or other mental health conditions. Homestead, which was called a temporary influx shelter, is located in Homestead, Florida, and at the time of our monitoring in 2019, had the dubious distinction of being the largest shelter for migrant children in the United States. It housed approximately 2,500 children, young men and women between the ages of 13 and 17. When we first learned of Homestead in 2018, we had a lot of questions, like who will staff a monitoring? How will we pay for it? Most of all, how will we get in? Shortly after we started having those considerations, we received a memo from NDRN, who had worked on an agreement with HHS ORR to acknowledge P&A access to ORR facilities all across the country and allowing us access to facilities like Homestead. When we saw that memo, we knew we had to go. Homestead is very much a pop-up institution. In fact, it is only opened in cases of what ORR calls a surge in immigration. It was made up largely of recycled buildings, which were previously used as a workforce housing for young people. But it was also populated by a number of tents, large air-conditioned tents that provided medical facilities, food service, all of the hygiene areas like the showers, bathrooms, those kinds of things. So it was very much open sort of on the fly as needed. ORR contracted with private for-profit corporations to operate Homestead as a temporary shelter for what they called unaccompanied children. In the space, we actually monitored Homestead on 2 different occasions, once in 2018 and once in 2019. In the space of that year, the population of Homestead expanded from 1,200 children to over 2,500 children in a very short period of time. When we visited, we noted that the facility was made up of the tents, as I mentioned. It was also made up of a number of bunk beds, auditoriums, gymnasiums, those sorts of things on the compound had been converted to sleeping facilities with rows and rows of bunk beds spaced close together. In light of the coronavirus, looking back on it now, it's hard to look at a facility like that without thinking what would happen at a facility like that had the pandemic hit with those children housed in those sorts of close quarters. Our report from the August 2018 visit noted serious concerns regarding overcrowding, length of stay of the children, and related treatment issues. Those concerns prompted our second visit in May of 2019, following reports about the expansion of the facility to nearly 2,500 children. At the time of our second visit, we noted that even though the facility had expanded to additional facilities, it felt more overcrowded than ever. More bunk beds, more tents, more temporary facilities. And even though there was more physical space available to the children, it felt even more overcrowded. It's widely acknowledged that many of the immigrant children detained by ORR at Homestead and other shelters around the country had experienced significant trauma and needed appropriate mental health care. Homestead, with its population of over 1,200 children at the time of our visit, was neither staffed nor designed to meet the needs of those children. Subjecting children with disabilities to the overcrowded and impersonal conditions at Homestead for extended periods of time only exacerbated their symptoms, and in our opinion, was a form of abuse and neglect in and of itself. What we found when we visited Homestead is that the overcrowding conditions had caused the Homestead operators to supplement their staff by using things like Skype and other remote services to provide care such as mental health care. We observed kids in mental health sessions sitting in large rooms at cubicles with earphones on, speaking with mental health counselors over computers with virtually no privacy or confidentiality at all. We were told by one child in a really compelling story that he was talking to his counselor about the harassment and bullying he was receiving as a result of his sexual orientation. And at some point in the middle of his counseling session, another child in the cubicle next to him stood up and began questioning about what he was talking about to his counselor. So obviously there was significant problems with the level of mental health care being provided and the situation in which it was being conducted. The other thing we really noted was the fact that the educational services that were being provided to the children there were really little more than make-work exercises. There were no educational assessments going on. Children were grouped together simply by age and not based on their educational ability. And even more to the point, from Disability Rights Florida's standpoint, there was virtually no IDEA type assessments or services provided to children with disabilities there. In addition, this being Florida, we were extremely concerned, given the temporary nature of the structures at the facility, about what would happen at the facility if there was a hurricane. Our second visit was conducted just 3 days before the beginning of hurricane season, and we questioned the facility operators about how they would evacuate the facility in the case of a storm. We got very little in response. They simply told us that, well, we'd take care of it. We'd use planes, trains, and automobiles, essentially, to get this shelter evacuated. It was clear that they had no actual plan for what they would do and how they would move over 2,000 children out of that facility to safety in the event of a storm. So based on these findings, we expressed extreme concern to the facility operators and ORR about how the facility was being operated and the kind of services that were being provided to children with disabilities there. On July 3rd, about 6 weeks after our visit in 2019, ORR stopped accepting additional children at Homestead, and about 1 month later announced the closure of the facility and indicated that the remaining children there would be transferred to other state-licensed ORR facilities or released to a sponsor. However, they made it clear that Homestead is not permanently closed. I would like to take all the credit for the closure of the facility, but of course we can't do that. The closure was clearly a group effort by a number of different organizations pushing for reform and closure of that facility. Notably, the National Center for Youth Law had ongoing litigation against the facility based on their Flores litigation and the Lucas R litigation. NDRN had pushed for the closure of ORR and improved facilities, the closure of Homestead and improved access and to care at the facility. In addition, NDRN was obviously critical in that they were the ones that got us access to the facility in the first place. I have to note that after our first visit, when we went to schedule our second visit to Homestead, ORR began to really push back on whether or not we should be allowed in. NDRN stepped in, negotiated with ORR, and made sure that we were able to get access and go into the facility for our second visit. In addition, there was significant grassroots organizing around the facility at Homestead, and they continually protested and pushed for closure. In addition, there was press reports on it and political pressure put on the administration to close the facility. All of those efforts combined resulted in the closure of Homestead and hopefully will result in the continued closure of the facility. The monitoring efforts at Homestead facility really underscore the importance of P&A Access Authority and the use of public reports. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I don't think it can be understated how important it was for Disability Rights Florida as the P&A to get into that facility using our access authority. We had unique and pretty unfettered access to all areas of this facility. In fact, as we're going through the facility, they showed us the sleeping areas that they wanted us to see, but we were able to say, well, we'd like to see that one over there too. And when we got in, we realized that that's where they had the rows and rows of bunk beds in former auditoriums and gymnasiums and those sorts of things. So we really were able to get access to all areas of the facility. And most importantly, we were able to gain access to the children with disabilities facilities at the facility itself. And the interviews we did with the children, we were able to sit down on a one-to-one basis, was particularly important in finding out what was really happening at the institution. We noted that in some cases, the children would start out during an interview telling us, I believe, what they thought we wanted to hear. and would give us reports about how well things were going. But as we talked and we continued to interview them and we gained some rapport with them, we learned more about what was actually happening and how the conditions at the facility were truly affecting those children, especially the children with mental health issues. So our access authority was critical to our ability to learn what was actually going on down there. And in some cases, our access authority was even broader than what was granted to the attorneys who were litigating the case. In addition, the fact that we were able to convert our monitoring report into a public report was particularly crucial. It gave us an opportunity to shine a public light on what was actually happening at that facility, and was particularly useful to the other groups and coalitions that were working for the closure of the facility. So, in short, the bottom line is that our access authority got us into a facility that very few other entities had any access to whatsoever. And the bottom line is that we were able to advocate and make sure that children housed there were free of abuse and neglect, and that their rights were being fully respected. And in closing, I'd just like to say that I am particularly proud to accept this award on behalf of Disability Rights Florida, because this was truly a group effort by our organization. The monitoring team was made up of individuals with various expertise from virtually every team at Disability Rights Florida. And staff members really stepped up to work on the monitoring of the facility, to go down to the facility on very short notice. It was an addition to their current workload and was extremely effective. Carol Stahersky, Natalie Alvarez, Penny Marrero, and myself were all involved in the team, and were from different parts of Disability Rights Florida. We had expertise in facility monitoring. We had expertise in educational services. We had expertise in reviewing mental health services. And we had expertise from areas like prison and jail context in monitoring and knowing what institutions were like. So this was truly a group effort. And of course, we also had the assistance of NDRN in getting us in the first place. So even though this award is being granted to Disability Rights Florida, I think that it accentuates the fact that with a collaborative effort, tremendous things can get done at places that ordinarily other organizations can't get access to. So thank you.
Our next speakers are Donna and Ricardo Thornton. Donna and Ricardo are nationally recognized self-advocates who helped forge the path for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities from living in institutions to living in their own home and starting a family. They met as residents of Forest Haven, a campus-style asylum in Laurel, Maryland, that housed children and adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities from 1925 until 1991. Married for over 30 years, Donna and Ricardo are parents and grandparents. They have shared their story on 60 Minutes, in the Washington Post, before the U.S. Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, and at countless conferences across the country.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am Raquel Rosa, and I am a Rep Payee analyst at NDRN. I have the pleasure of interviewing Donna and Ricardo Thornton, who will be sharing with us their experiences of people who once lived in institutions and who now live very full and robust lives in the community. I've had the pleasure of knowing them for several years when I supported the DC Self-Advocacy Coalition, Project Action. Hi, Ricardo and Donna, how are you?
All right, how you doing?
Great. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. I just have a few questions for you about your story, and I'm really looking forward to everything that you have to share with everybody. So to start off, tell us how you met.
How we met, honey? Well, we met as friends at an institution, and she used to remember when we met, right, honey? We met at an institution, and we were friends, and our friendship wound up being more than friends later on down the road. We both We both, like I said, lived in various cottages. We lived in you want me to just
We
take?
live in Jones Hall together. He was living upstairs, I was living downstairs.
Mhm. And we had romance, right?
Yes, we was friends. We were friends. We were friends. We were working at McDonald's.
Mhm.
He wanted to go to school, and I told him that ain't work first. Don't you want to make some money? And he said, yes, but I want to go to school and get my education. So I said, go ahead. You could do your education, but I want the money. I wanted to work.
Yeah. And so we lived in an institution, as she said, and then one of the things about the institution was that there you didn't have decision making. They made decisions for you. You depended on them, and when we were working, we had to turn in our funds. Even though we had made nice little money, we still had to turn it in. If we didn't, then we had trouble. We got in trouble, right, honey?
Right.
So we had to turn that money in.
Yes, we
Or you
had
don't
to
get no
turn it
allowance,
in
right?
to the staff.
Mhm.
If we didn't do it, we'd get in trouble. But one day we did not do it, and we got in trouble.
We ain't gonna say that. Now, wait a minute. You'll notice when you're talking to the thorns, we bounce off of one another. So it's just part of the excitement and not looking back. We look back at our past, right? Right, honey.
Right.
So leaving the institution and moving in the community. My wife had a beautiful place.
Yeah, I was living I was at first, and then when I got out, I was living out on the outside. I was living along Maryland. I was still working at McDonald's. I had my own. I was living with this lady, Mary Miller. Then I got out. Then I got out of there. Then I got my own place, and my own place, and then
She'll
me
call
and
me.
Ricardo,
Mhm.
then me and Ricardo got together, and then he came and visited me in Long,
Yeah.
Maryland,
She had
in
a
my
nice
own
place.
place.
She had a nice place. At that time, she had her own place. I was living in a group home. And
No.
I was living in a group home. I still didn't get out mine. You was
Oh yes,
you
yes.
was you were for,
Yeah.
and I used to come out. You were my excuse to come out there and spend time with you.
Yeah, he spent time with me. He spent the night sometimes, and like on a Friday night, and then on a Friday night we used to go in the movies, and on Saturdays we used to go shopping, stuff like that. Little things like that. We had a nice time together.
You talked a little bit about starting to live in the community by yourselves, but can you talk to us about the struggle that you experienced to get married and to have a family?
Yes, yes. When we came over one day and she had me carrying a rug to her house, because I was handy around the house, wasn't I, honey?
Huh?
I was handy around your house, wasn't I?
Yeah, a little,
But then
not much.
But then she proposed to me.
Yeah,
She proposed to me
him.
and asked me about marriage, and I told her that I wouldn't get married till I'm about 65, and she said by that time nobody gonna want my ass. So we we wound up laughing with it, but then we decided to take it to a next level and ask our social workers about that, because we were really in love, and we talked to our social worker, and the first thing came out was marriage. You just got out of an institution. Why would y'all be looking at marriage? That's just too fast right now. No, hold off, Donna. You don't need to marry right now. Just wait a little while. And it was something we really, really wanted to do. Right,
And
honey?
we went on and did, we talked to our counselor, and I think about it, and I said to myself, I figured like, if you could do it, we could do it.
And there were just so many negative things about people with disabilities that people just didn't understand. And we wanted to show people that after hearing all the negatives about group homes and people coming into the community and about marriage is prohibited, we wanted to do something to make a difference. So we invited those people to come to our wedding. And we were not, we wanted the whole world to come to the wedding, but unfortunately we were able to get the photographer from the Washington Post, and we were able to get Mike Wallace, who was on 60 Minutes, who came out to Forest Haven to visit and see the institution for himself. Forest Haven was a place where many people with developmental disability live. There were various levels. There are girl cottages, right? Boy
Magnolia,
cottages.
Camellia Cottage, what's the other cottages?
Magnolia, Camellia, Infirmary, Nursery.
Nursery.
You had Azalea.
Azalea Cottage.
Most of the cottages that were out there at that time were named after trees.
Each one of them had a name to their cottage.
They had the trees that were out there. The cottages were named after the trees.
Yeah.
Like the oak tree, you had oak cottage. Like the maple tree, you had maple cottage.
Magnolia Cottage.
Yeah. So we look back at the past, and then I had a brother and a sister that I didn't know lived there before me. And that was really kind of, I had to get adjusted to know that I had a brother and sister there. And family who come to see them came to see me. And I kind of felt that I didn't really know them because I lived in another institution before Forest Haven. I lived at DC Village, so it took a while for us to build up a relationship. Now we have a better relationship. Unfortunately, I lost my sister at Forest Haven. And I promised her that I would advocate for change. And that was really a tough time because she could not read, but she had other motivations. One day she's up, one day she's down. But when they put medicine in her and Thorazine, and it just tore me up to see that. And I said, well, whenever I get a chance to advocate, I'm hoping that no one have to live in an institution to be treated like that. So she had good days and she had bad days, but good thing is we're out and we're making a difference, right, honey?
Yeah.
That's right. So what has life been like living in your own home and participating in your own community?
Oh, it's beautiful. I got a wife now. You got a hubby. No, you're okay. I'll be on my good behavior. I got a wife, and I'm happy that she's been with me. And I always hear the story of we have a beautiful son. We had the marriage, then after that we had the baby.
We had the baby. It was 2 pounds, 11 ounces.
And he was real small, and they didn't think that we could.
2 pounds, 11 ounces.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's a man.
And the story around that was this is where the problem was for me. I had a basketball game that I needed to attend because my team was playing one of the hottest teams in DC, and that's the Art. And my wife was supposed to be going for a checkup. The checkup wound up being that they were concerned on how the baby was sitting, that they wanted to get the baby out a little earlier. So they asked her, and she called and asked me to come to the hospital. And I said, but I have a game I really have to attend, but I'll be there later. She said, no, they want you here now. So an adjustment, I went to the hospital because I heard some cameras were there and 60 Minutes and Mike might be there. So I didn't want to get beat up. I went to the hospital and I got to see this beautiful gift. At 2 pounds, 11 ounce baby boy.
Yeah.
And we were so excited. And my wife asked the doctor, which I will never forget. And that was, does he have his hands?
And his fingers. 10 fingers, 10 fingers. 10 fingers and 10 toes. And the doctor said yes.
And one thing that Donna asked, and I never forget, and I tell this in all of my conferences, and that is, she always said, Doctor, can I ask you a question? And the doctor said, sure. Will my baby love me? Yes, sure. No. Will my baby love me? Think about it. You're coming out of an institution. You're coming into something brand new. you're getting ready to you're married, and you have this beautiful child here. And it was tough times. She had to really get her husband in on board on understanding that this is a real baby and it needs real love. And it took a lot of people to push and encourage me to show me, and I think I did a better job, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Think I did a good job? Think we did a good job?
We, not you. We.
So what's happening with Ricky now?
He's 34. He's about 34. About 34 years old.
He's married.
He's married. He got 3 kids. One is not by him. His name is Daniel. He's autism. The 2 girls, he got a 5 years old, and he got an 8 years old little girl. And they all doing well in school. Was doing good in school, but we don't know.
And we had got like we had it for the weekend, and then
we
were teaching them. We were showing them some skills that we learned and what we used to teach Ricky. And he seems to be in the right track.
Yeah.
And I'm just hoping that he just continues to stay focused, and I'm just proud of him for what he's accomplished. Right, honey?
Yes. And I hope when this thing is over, they can go back to school, if it's not too late.
So as you're talking about education being important for your grandchildren, I'm thinking about how education is an opportunity and it opens doors for people. So could you talk to us about why it's important for people with disabilities to have the same opportunities as anybody else?
Sure.
Yes.
You want to go first?
You go first.
It's so important because we have been labeled with a label that we should have never have had, and that's the R word. We got rid of the R word. It's because when you use the R word, they think that we're not there, or we're dysfunction, or something really, really is wrong. And that's not really true. Because I strongly believe that it's not the disability, but it's the ability that they have within to achieve those goals. And it takes people who are working with us to provide those good work ethic, right, honey? That's a big word. Such as me working at the Martin Luther King Library through special ed, I got the job, and I'm now on my 41 years now.
Yeah.
You yawning at me? Am I that bored? Oh, no. 41 years at the library. That's where I worked, and I'm very happy because I really want to send a message to people who are going to special ed, are going to school with disabilities. Understand that when you're in special, it does not mean because your disability is to confine. It means that you're going to get some extra help to help you pull forward, that you can get the job you always want. You can do this. I've done it. My wife used to work at, where you worked at?
Walter Reed Medical Center. At first I was working at Walter Reed across the street. And I used to love going to work. But the thing about it, when I used to go to work, I used to see the soldiers, and they very friendly. And I always said, to myself, I said, I like working. I love to work at Walter Reed because the people are very friendly to me. The patients and stuff like that, made me think about a lot of things about patients.
And now what's happening? What's happening with you now?
Well, now I used to work at Walter Reed, and I used to work at Walter Reed Medical Center. But now I don't work, but I'm now retired. So now I'm retired, and
you're serving on
so
committees.
I just sit home and do nothing.
No, you serve on committees.
I serve on committee. Meeting. I go to meetings, different meetings. I serve on the board. I serve on
the family advisory.
family driver, what?
Family Advisory Committee.
Advisor, family advisor. I've served on
Quality Trust.
Quality Trust, and I've served on
Project Action.
Project Action boards. And I like that. I like them boards. Yes.
Well, I know that serving on boards has been important to the both of you. Could you talk a little bit about why it's important that people with disabilities serve on boards and they have an impact on their non-disabled peers?
Absolutely, because they can make a difference, because people would love to hear what's really happening
in the world.
And if you go out and you tell your story and serving, you're making a difference to help some of the others. Because you always got to look at it. Someone helped you.
Out in the community.
They helped you and pulled you through. So it'd be nice to help someone else and partner with like, for an example, getting rid of the R word was not easy, but through Project Action and partner with other boards and committees in DC, we were able to change that, remove that word. And a lot of states have removed the word, which is very good. We have the power to can do this, but we just have to continue to advocate for change for that. And I really believe that us coming together makes a difference.
Absolutely. So what advice do you have for people who advocate for people with disabilities?
The advice I have is keep doing what you're doing. I think we're on the right track. They need to hear from us. They can always hear from someone who has never experienced what you have experienced. Your stories are very powerful. My wife right here had a vision long before she met me on a swing at Forest Haven. And she always talks about, you should tell your story. Like,
yes.
Tell that. Go ahead. It's better for me.
Yes, I had a swing down at Forest Haven. And I always, when I used to get upset with the staff, I always go down to the ball field. And I used to swing on this swing. I used to walk around to see the graves, think about, talk about, when if we're going to ever get out and be on our own, work, have jobs, do things that other people do on the outside. And I used to always say, I wanted to get married. First, I wanted a house, get married, have a job, get married, have some children like everybody else. Live my life the way I want to live it. And I want other people to do the same thing that I wanted to, like I wanted to do. Get married. Other people can get married just like me. Just like us, me and Ricardo, it's not no harm on that, It's no harm.
And one of the things I like is that we had a chance to go to some of the states, to some of the meetings, and meet some of the wonderful people in other states, like what was that? Boston.
Boston.
To speak with some of them, and it's the same thing we're doing here today.
They doing there,
and they're making a difference. So I think if we continue to educate and show others, and really just continue to be a partner, because people will believe and listen to you. Your stories makes truly a difference. Right, Berkel?
That's absolutely right. I think one of my favorite things that you say is that teamwork makes the dream work.
Yes, teamwork makes the dream work. It's not just the dream. You got to have the team. Ain't that right, honey?
That's right. Thank you both so much for spending some time with us and for sharing your story with us.
Oh, thank you.
As Tom mentioned earlier, this year we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. 30 years of the ADA has proven that America benefits when people with disabilities are able to live in the community and all members have the supports they need to contribute to that success. At no time has that truth been more evident than right now. The coronavirus pandemic has laid bare for all what we in the network have always known. segregating people with disabilities in institutions is outdated, cruel, and dangerous. In some states, more than 30% of all infections have occurred in nursing homes or other congregate care facilities. That is unacceptable, but it also creates a difficult challenge for our network. Once again, PNAs are on the front lines, ensuring people with disabilities in institutions and in the community receive the services they are entitled to and have access to the same health care. We know that before the pandemic, many people with disabilities who lived in the community were not benefiting from the full potential of community living. We knew that understaffed and underfunded community resources often put people at risk. This only became worse during the pandemic. So while we focus on protecting those people who are living in large congregate facilities, we have to spend an equal amount of time making sure those people in the community are safe and sound and really experiencing the promise that we made to them that they would have better lives if they came into the community. We know the PNAs have had to learn how to work in this pandemic and are often not able to visit and monitor in our normal ways. But PNAs are being creative in developing virtual monitoring techniques to make sure that we can protect our clients wherever they reside, live, or work. I know we are up to this challenge. We have never shied away from hard work, and we won't start now. Over the course of the next 3 weeks, I hope you will take advantage of the many learning opportunities we have planned for you. Don't forget to sign up for PAL credits, and those of you who need continuing legal education credits can get them as well. We remain committed to bring you to the exceptional training and technical assistance you deserve. Thank you all to our speakers, and congratulations again to Disability Law Center of Alaska and Disability Rights Florida.
Since we first began recording the remarks for this plenary, our nation has once again been confronted by the vast disparities that exist in our justice system. Before we end today, I would like to comment on what has occurred in the past few days. The murder of George Floyd by a police officer in Minneapolis is a tragedy, but it is also all too common. The African American community has been subjected to police brutality and an unequal justice system for far too long. It is time for this to end. It is time for our country to face the facts. I'm often asked, how is this a disability issue? The answer is simple. People with disabilities are also people of color, they're immigrants, refugees, members of the LGBT community, and members of every religious group. They face the same hatred and bigotry and are often subject to the same treatment by police who are not trained to recognize their needs as people with disabilities. So I want to be clear on this point. The National Disability Rights Network stands on the side of those who are protesting another needless death, who reject hate and demand justice. NDRN will continue to work with our partners, the many other civil rights groups who share our values of community integration and inclusion for all until hatred, bigotry, and racism are extinguished for good. Thank you.